It is the half of the hour. So welcome to the second and final pre-conference session of Track 1 today, Building a Better Reporter Through Community Collaboration. I am Susan Morrison from Pines, and I'll be your moderator today. This session will be recorded, and I'll be keeping an eye on chat. So before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Evergreen Collaborative Development Initiative, Equinox Open Library Initiative, Unique Management, Midwest Tape, and Stat Courier. And so now I'll turn it over to our presenters, Lena Hernandez, Stephanie Leary, and Andrea Bunce-Nyman, all from Equinox. I'll start sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. To that one. Okay, just to confirm that y'all can see my screen. All right, good. Let me find the notes, and then we can get started. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're happy to be able to talk to you about the new reporter today, as well as some of the history of the old reporter, and give some examples of how to use it. For those of you who don't know us, here we are. I am there on the right, Andrea Bunce-Nyman. I am the project manager for software development at Equinox, and I worked with our development team on the reports project. Lena, did you want to introduce yourself, and then Stephanie?
Sure. I'm Lena Hernandez, Product and Education Specialist. So I do a lot of training with Equinox. Stephanie.
And I'm Stephanie Leary. I'm the front-end developer, which means I'm in charge of the user interface, and so all the bits that you actually see and interact with is often my fault.
Or your credit. Okay, so just to set a few expectations about what this presentation will and will not cover. When we set out to write this, we aimed this at sort of intermediate end users of reports. If you're a beginner or an expert or an administrator, I hope that we hope that you'll still find some things of value in this presentation, but just that's sort of the general audience we were going for. We will have 3 separate Q&A periods during this session. I would ask if you could hold your questions to those, we'd appreciate it. But if you have an absolutely burning question that you must get to while we're presenting, please drop that in the chat. There's also going to be 2 short breaks because 2 hours of reports is quite a lot of content, and we figured that both you and us could use a little break. So this is the agenda of what we're going to go through today. So obviously this is the front matter, the introduction. We'll then go into some of the history of the reports interface in Evergreen, including, for those of you who are into this, some code that you can spelunk if you really want to go back to the very beginning. And we'll also cover the older versions of the reporter in the Zool interface, as well as the iterations that went through the early versions of the web client. And then we'll show you a little bit of the current reports interface. This is the new reports, Angular reports. You will hear us refer to it by many names. Then we'll have our first Q&A and break period. Then we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of those new features in reports, things that have come since the debut of the new reporter or that came along with it. Then we'll have our second Q&A period and a little break. And then finally, the last segment will be what we've called practical reports. This will talk about creating templates and running reports, and Lena will be giving us a demo of that. And then we'll have time at the end for a final Q&A and wrap up. So I always like to start presentations with definitions. I know that I and many others who have been in this community a long time are guilty of using sometimes more jargon and assuming that people know what that means, and they don't. So here's a list of some terms that you might or might not be familiar with that you might hear in this presentation. I would particularly like to point out the last one, which is the IDL. Now, if you're an admin or developer, you're pretty familiar with this. If you're an end user, you might not be. That is a very wordy definition there. Believe me, I actually cut it down from the definition that I was given by one of my developers. But the parts that I always remember is FM equals field mapper. It maps the fields of the objects to the database effectively. And IDL stands for interface definition language. It tells the interface which objects to use. So that's the important thing to know about the IDL in this instance. So if you really want to dive deep into that, it is an entire massive XML file that defines all sorts of things about how objects are used in Evergreen. And that is outside of the scope of this presentation, but it is helpful to know what that does. So some of the report's specific definitions that, again, you may or may not be familiar with. Cloning is an action to most often used in templates, but can also be used in report definitions. It makes a copy of the existing template or report definition, and it lets you make edits to the new version, and it leaves the original one unchanged. Field transforms are what you do to your data field. So in the database, data is stored in a particular format as defined by that field. And sometimes you want this to be look nicer. So you don't want to see the full 15 or so character timestamp. You just want to see the date. So one of the transforms you can put on a date field is just show me year, month, day. And so that you can also do like counts and things like that, averages, and we'll go into a little bit of this later. But for reports purposes, a transform is basically taking data and making it do something a little bit different in your report, so it displays the way you need it to. Joins and nulls are very related in Evergreen, well, in any database, but a join is what happens when you connect two different database tables, and there are different types of joins that will define how which information is included in the output and whether it shows null values or not. And we'll get into a lot of this later. And then nullability is the way that Evergreen handles the inclusions of that. And then operators are used to within report filters to compare types of data. So operators could be between, greater than, less than, equals, etc. So that's telling you on a filter, if you want to say only show non-deleted records, the operator you would have deleted, and then the operator equals, and then false. So bonus definitions is template versions. And I sort of shoved this slide in here because template versions is one of those things that comes up in a lot of ways that a lot of people don't necessarily understand versioning of templates, and I would include myself on that. I'm not super solid on template versioning, but the short version is templates have versions. So then this is because of, as it says on the slide, templates have needed to become more and more complex as the reporter has grown in the last 20 odd years. So template versioning helps to instruct the reporter what to do with the template instructions. And there are 7 template versions in Evergreen's history, which are listed there below. Now, there was work done to convert from versions 4 to 5 back in the early days of the web client. And if you have very old templates, it is not at all uncommon for long-standing users of Evergreen to have templates sticking around from, versions, version 3 and earlier. I would strongly encourage you to rewrite those to the latest version if you can. You've probably already experienced that using old templates and newer versions of the reporter can result in bad or unexpected data. At the very least, you should probably be cloning these templates and trying to update them that way. But that is sometimes why, if you're using a very old template in a very new version of the software, things just might not behave the way you want. So check those old templates.
If you're having problems and your template is, ancient, just recreate it. We sometimes get support things for old templates, and the best we can tell is, sorry, that template is just haunted. It's old. but recreating it, even if you just kind of make it look exactly the same, the act of recreating it in the new version will make you a template that works.
Right. Thank you. My windows got reordered. All right. Ack, I know how to computer, you guys. I swear. This is what I want. Great. Okay. So we've all been contemplating this wonderful picture of Mike, which is actually not a picture that he took to show about developing the reporter. It was about developing RESTful API, I believe. So, but he was instrumental in writing most of the old reporter and a lot of the back end pieces of the new reporter. So, you know, this is the guy that gets the credit or the blame. Sorry, Mike, if you're in the audience. So, version 1 of reports. This was the progenitor of Evergreen reports was a pre-Evergreen custom reporter that was actually built by Jason Etheridge, I believe as part of when he was a contractor for GPLS, but somebody correct me if I'm wrong about that. And that was adapted for Evergreen by Mike Riley Under, but it was very, very different than what we know of the reporter now, or even as we knew it in 2006. So the reporter did not know about the Evergreen database schema. It was just sort of a thing that sat off to the side. It predated the IDL. It was built with something called a star schema structure, and do not ask me to get into a great amount of detail about that. I have linked the Wikipedia article if you would like to read about star schema structure. I am not a database historian. But it was a structure of reporting that this old reporter used, and it did assume a separate data warehouse, and everything was sort of hard coded. So you had your XML files that would describe what you could do with which sources were reportable and what you could do with them. And thanks to Mike, he did go dig up that ancient commit. If any of you, you know, lovely weirdos out there would like to go spelunk the old code, we had a half of a thought to try to fire it up just enough to get a screenshot of the old system, but that became a rabbit hole that was unfortunately not worth the time it was going to take to do it. But there's the old commit for all of you code historians out there. Now, following that, in 2006, we had the debut of the Zool reporter. So that's what most of you know as the legacy or current reporter. Also known as the oldest established continuously operating interface in Evergreen. And I hope if you know the Guys and Dolls song, you just sang that along in your head. So this is what the main folder interface looked like in there. If you have used reports at any time since 2006 up to the modern era, this looks very, very familiar with you. This had not changed in that time. This image is actually from the Evergreen 1.6 documentation, which is why it's a little bit fuzzy. But this was the version of reporter that lived in Evergreen version 1 through 3.12. And I do realize that this presentation is hanging a few different definitions of things off of versions. So to be clear, there's versions of templates, there's versions of the reporter, there's versions of Evergreen. They're not the same versions. So this main folder's interface basically did not change in that time. It was even replicated in the web client, which came out in version 3.0 in 2017. And this is what the template builder looked like in that early version. Again, for those of us who've been around a while, this should look very, very familiar. In the upper left column, you've got your source selector. And then you've got field name and field transform are the other two things that you can do on the top there. So you can select which fields you want to show. It tells you what data type it is. And then from that selected field, you can choose a different transform. So in this case, they're looking at a circulation, which is a timestamp field. And they have said that they want that to show as year and month. They don't want the whole long timestamp. This is also showing at the bottom the displayed fields, which is the hidden tab right now, and then base filters. So displayed fields would show you a list of fields displayed in this report. Base filters shows you the filters that you want on this. And in this case, they have chosen that field, that year and month, checkout date, time, they want that to equal, and then the value is blank. And what this does in any template, when you have a blank value in a filter field, it lets the person who runs the report add a value in that template. So this was unchanged until 2016 version 2.11 when an AngularJS version was introduced. And that is this version. I could not get a lot of great pictures of this, so I apologize. But in the left, we have the source selector again, similar as the last slide, just a little bit nicer looking. And then we have the fields here in the middle column. So those are the fields on that shelving location table, which it's hard to see on this screenshot, but that's what's selected. And then the various transforms you can apply to that data. And this image, I had to take it from the 3.12 documentation because while this came out in 2.11, it was not documented till 3.12. So this is my plea to join DIG, help the documentation interest group. A lot of community volunteers do documentation, and we need your help. So this concludes my DIG plea for this presentation. So this was the kind of the top portion of that AngularJS template builder. And then this is the bottom, and this is showing the display fields tab, and then there's the filters tab available as well. And this will show you what you've got, displaying in your reporter, what the columns are, various data types, and what you can do with moving fields around in this. And then this column that's kind of covered up is showing the transforms on that. So that was all displayed in one screen. I just broke it up into 2 slides because it's a long screen, and I was also borrowing images. So what are the pros and cons of the legacy reporter? So obviously it's established, it's pretty well documented. It's very familiar to not only longtime users, but developers, administrators, trainers, anybody that needed to interact with it. Even though it was certainly buggy, the bugs were well known and sometimes fixed. So, my sarcastic comment at the bottom here is there's nothing like the devil, which is true. It was not ideal in a lot of circumstances, but it was really well known and well understood by a lot of people. However, there were some problems with it, obviously. There was a significantly outdated interface on the main landing page. I mean, it was like, shades of the late 90s, even up until 2-3 years ago. And as this moved farther and farther away, this page became very, very slow, very difficult to load. If you've ever tried to page through templates and reports list in the old interface, my pain. It was just a trial to try to find sometimes older things in there. Although there was a search templates feature added at some point along the way, which made that much easier. Approximately only 3 people understood nullability. That is an estimate. I was not one of them. And of course, it was completely inaccessible in terms of end user accessibility or use by anybody with any kind of assistive device. So that brings us up to the new reports interface. And I'm going to turn the talking over to Stephanie.
Oh my. All right, I love the meme here. I will let Andrea explain that one if she wants to, but
I was just going to say we can just pause and admire it for a moment.
We can, yeah. Okay. New reporter. So this was interesting for me coming in as a developer because I really wasn't all that familiar with the old reports feature. I was still fairly new to Equinox and to Evergreen. And so I got a quick walkthrough of old reports, and I spent half of it hiding my face like this from a user interface perspective. And they were like, no, you have to actually look at it. I was like, no, it hurts. There were a lot of things from my perspective that needed to change just to make it kind of compatible with modern standards for how user interfaces need to work, especially for accessibility. We need to make things work with the keyboard for people who can't use a mouse. We have to make it work with audio controls for people who are blind and using some kind of screen reader. So there were just lots and lots of structural things that aren't even really visible to you if you're using it, using a standard mouse and keyboard and screen, but that were just like a lot of the invisible underpinnings of this needed to be completely redone. And that usually when we do that, we end up with something that is better and more usable for everyone. Occasionally we have little bobbles there. Sometimes we don't quite get it right on the first try, but that's kind of what this whole presentation is about. So our next slide is today. So the new reporter that we developed, I guess it was 2 summers ago now, was released in version 3.12 in 2023. Mike Rylander and I wrote it over one very long summer. And the King County Library System had sponsored that project. The idea was that we would take all of the work that had been done to sort of simplify the reports interface and make it a little easier to use in the simple reports feature, and make the full reporter work like simple reporter for the most part. The idea was that we would reuse some of that code. The interface would be consistent and familiar for the most part. Lena did a very extensive documentation project, which we are incredibly grateful for. I will say, sometimes coming in as a new developer to the community and realizing that the old feature isn't really documented it makes my job harder. And so again, join Dig. Next slide. So the plan for this really had been set in place before I joined Equinox, because we have kind of long timelines sometimes for our development projects. So even though I had been here for a while at that point, the plan was set months before that. But I did visit the reports interest group and get some feedback from them on how simple reports worked and what they would like to see in the full reports. We weren't able to incorporate all of that because, again, the plan was kind of already in place. But we incorporated, I think, about half of the wish list that folks gave me in that meeting. And then we kind of put the rest on the wish list and worked through them as we were working through feedback and bugs later. And I think we got a lot of it at this point. Oh, thank you for hosting it, Jessica. That was great. And Elizabeth Davis, too. The interest group was incredibly helpful. And I wish that we could have done more to get some user feedback going into the project. And we will be doing a bit more of that in future projects. So fun fact, the reports user interface, because it has so many moving pieces and it has so many ways of changing the data that you're looking at and filtering data, unlike most screens in Evergreen, reports actually uses almost every built-in UI widget that we have. And by that, I mean date pickers, date range selectors, checkbox lists with filters, type ahead filters that shorten the list that you're looking at based on what you've entered. It's got big grids, it's got small grids, it's got folder lists, it's got a giant org unit tree selector. Most screens in Evergreen don't have all of those in one place. They have like 2 or 3 of those things. Reports had all of them. And since we were still kind of in the early stages of working through making the accessibility updates to the staff client, reports ended up being the place where a lot of that converged. And we were doing a lot of core user interface updates at the same time as we were building the new reporter. So a lot of that all got kind of smushed into one project. And then we ran into another problem where we, the developer team at Equinox, were working on 3 concurrent projects that summer: the new mark editor, the custom org unit trees, and reports all at the same time. And they shared an unusual amount of code. Usually if we do concurrent projects, they're kind of side by side, they don't touch that much. These completely overlapped and intermingled, especially the combo box and the org unit selector.
You should probably fire your project manager.
There's no way that you could have known that going in. And I didn't know that going in because I wasn't familiar with all of these pieces yet. Now that I've been here 2.5 years, I could look at that and say, oh, wow, all of that stuff is going to overlap. That's going to be a huge pain. I couldn't do that at the time. I was too new. And so the other thing that made this project challenging, honestly, was the plan to reuse simple reports. Ended up being not that simple because we were taking something that had been intended to be used in a very simple way and kind of bending it into a new shape that it wasn't originally intended for. And so between all of those kind of moving parts and things that needed to be updated, it ended up being a very hairy project from my perspective. And again, I was totally unfamiliar with Reporter going in. So this was a trial by fire. And I think our next slide is one of our many reactions that we share anytime that we come across a development project that uses the combo box, which is that drop-down selector that you can type into. I do this face every time we have to update it. And we were making big changes to it for both the reporter and the mark editor at the same time. And we still have bugs for that outstanding, as those of you who use the cataloging module know very well. But with all of that said, I'm still really pleased with most of how the reports module came out. All right, next. What's next? I think you have to move it, Andrea. I can't.
I did move it?
No.
Yes.
I don't see.
So that was combo box, and now it's things that are the same. Oh, would it help if we turned off our cameras?
Yeah, I don't know. It's still on the combo box slide for me, and that's okay.
Okay. Is everyone else seeing the things that are the same slide?
There we go. Sorry about that lag, y'all. Yeah. All right.
Yay,
so
Internet.
The basic structure of the screen is the same, essentially. We have the templates, the report's output. You can clone a template, but you can't edit it. The template can be used to generate a report. The report is what generates the output. The output you can run either once, or you can set it up to be recurring. You can set it to run at a specific time. And the template filters can be hard-coded, or you can set them up to be filled in at the time that you want to run the report. And then the data, of course, can be transformed, as Andrea described earlier. You can take whatever format it comes out of the database in and turn it into what you want to see in your output. Our next slide. Things that are new. So you will hear all of us on the development team talk about Angular, and that means nothing to you as an end user. We realize this. It is a big deal in development. It is the progression of the code framework that we rely on. It does a lot of things for us. We are dependent on it for many things, and it has progressed over the years from an older version called AngularJS, which is what circulation is written in, and other, I think there's still a couple of old parts of ACK that are in that version, and we are moving all of the staff screens into the newer version, into Angular, but it's taking quite a while because Evergreen is big and complicated. So if you spot a table that lets you resize those columns, that's the newer version. And we got that for reports by doing this project. We kind of have evolved the way that we think about those data type labels. So you remember in the very old version that Andrea showed you, when we looked at the columns that you could get out of a table, there was a thing off to the side that said what format this data is in. Is it an integer? Is it a Boolean, a true false? Is it just plain text? Is it a date? And then in the more recent version of reports, those were replaced with an icon. And I said, I don't think those icons are very clear. And I asked some people and they're like, no, we don't ever remember what those are. It's like, okay, we can go back to labeling those with actual words. We changed the way it looks a little bit. Now they're kind of a lighter gray text that happens after the label, but we've evolved these things as we figure out what does and does not work. What makes it simpler? What makes it more confusing? We're going to go for less confusing, hopefully. As you build your template, when you end up, you choose your field, you can rename it for how it's going to appear in your output. And it used to be very confusing because it wouldn't really show you what the original path had been. And now you can see the whole path of that field and its original name. So you can kind of keep track of what you have renamed and where it came from. So that's new. A big new feature that folks were really excited about when we did the bucket project a few months later, we came back and we added a feature to take the output of a report and send it directly into a bucket. I know many of you were super excited about that. I don't use this feature personally, so I'm like,
It was a pretty big deal.
Okay, it was a big deal. I trust you. And now we have a slightly better administration screen for the list of reports. You can view everything that has been created from a specific template. You can find all of the outputs that were created from a report. So you can kind of travel backwards and figure out where things came from a little bit more easily than you could before. And this part I am excited about. In the interest of making things less confusing, hopefully, and clearer, we changed the way we described nullability, which is basically saying, do you want to see rows that are empty or not? When you run your report and you choose a field, let's say a date, do you want to see all of the fields that have, this date or greater? Okay, fine. But do you also want to see the fields that don't have a date at all? That's what nullability means. And if you have worked with SQL or databases of any kind, what we're talking about here is left join versus a right join, right? Or a union. But we know that not everybody has that background in database jargon. And so we're trying to find the words that make this work for everybody. There probably really isn't a set of words that's going to make it work for everybody. We're trying to lean towards using standard database jargon wherever we can, so that at least if you've had that training in other databases, this will make sense to you, hopefully. But yes, I would love never to see the word nullability ever again. That'd be great. I may have a lag again. I'm still on the things that are new screen.
Oh, yeah, sorry, you hadn't asked for next slide.
Oh, you're
there
correct.
it is. Ta-da.
There it is. Ta-da. Okay.
Dang.
What changed? No. So the fun thing is, usually with development, it's the developers who are the lag. So this is fun that it, for once, it is Andrea. No, I'm joking. I say this with love. Okay. So here is our new main grid. This is the table of reports. We're looking right now at the templates. As you can see on the left, we're in a template folder. You can see which ones are open. We're in the folder called patron count reports, which is great. I love the fact that this is highlighted now and not just bold. It's a little bit easier to find. And we have all of our, you don't have to kick people out. The chat's being silly for those of you who are watching this later. So we have all of our template-based options here. You can create a new template, you can rename the folder, you can add a subfolder, you can share the folder, which is a big deal. And how that works, I'm going to leave it to Lena to demonstrate that in her demo later. But we thought a lot about sharing these and how sharing should work and how we should present that in terms of the user interface. Let's go to the next one. So here is the field chooser. Once you have decided you've set up, you're setting up a new template, let's say, you've chosen the ILS user table. Here are all of the fields that we have available in that table for you to choose from. And if you check something in this middle column where it says all fields, those are all the ones that are available. When you check them, they go into the right column, and those are the ones that are going to be in your report output. And here's where you can choose what order they go in, what transformation you want to apply, if any. If it says raw data, that means it's coming at you in the output the same way it came out of the database. We're not doing anything to it. If it says count, you're going to get a sum of all of the rows, not even their values, but just how many rows there were in the output. If you do a sum or an average, you'll get those. If there's a date field in there, you can choose exactly how you want that date to display. There's a few other transformations that you can do. And if you want a hint here, if you're leaving one of these for the person running the report later to fill in, you can add a little hint to what they need to do. Let's go to the next. So once you've chosen the fields that are going to display, you might want to filter out some data and narrow it down a little bit to what you want to see. And that may depend on some different fields. So we have, again, a field chooser here. And these, when you check one, you're going to go into the right section and we're going to ask, okay, how do you want to filter this? Do you need to transform it first? And then like what operator do you want to use? Do you want to pick something, a few values from a predefined list? Do you want it to be equal to or greater than or less than a value that you put in? This is great for numbers and dates. How do you want to massage this data that we're getting out of the database? That's what your filters are for. And next. And then we go to layout questions. We go, okay, we've got the fields that we've chosen how we're going to filter things out. And then how is it going to look in the end? Are we going to sort this in a certain way? Do we need to rearrange these fields? And you're looking at a top to bottom list of things here, but what that's going to look like when you get your sort of spreadsheet view is left to right. Unless you're in Arabic, in which case you are going to go right to left. And here's where you can kind of see that whole path at the bottom. So if you've renamed one of these fields, like where it says, number of accounts, maybe the pound sign was originally the word number and you renamed it. In that little arrow list of like the breadcrumbs below, it'll show you what it originally was. So you can kind of keep track of which field this is. Let's do the next one.
Sort order?
Oh, sort order, yes. How you want to sort each of these columns. So your choices are basically ascending or descending. I think if you don't choose anything, if I remember correctly, it will come out in the same way that just whatever order it was originally in the database. Am I correct on that?
No, I think the default is ascending
Is
by
it? Okay.
by column. But what you can
Gotcha.
do with sort order is change those, so you no longer have to order your columns in the way you want the sorting to be. You can, tell it to sort differently. Or what I always used to do is dump it in Excel and deal with the sort there. But you can now instruct it to sort first sort, second sort, etc. So
Gotcha.
right in the interface.
All right. Next, we'll stop for questions in just a second. And then here, so we've set up the template, and now we are going to run a report based on that template. So we have to give it a name, and then we have to choose, in this case, we had a filter that was set up where we didn't supply the list when we set up the template. So now we have to choose which items we want for this particular report. So we set up this template to run a report based on a particular org unit that would be in a list, and now we have to choose the list that we're going to run it for. And so here in the middle here where we have this filter value, this is where we're going to check off the ones we want to see. And you can, if you have a particularly long list of org units here, you can type stuff into that filter box and it will shorten the list. You still have to check the box though. Typing something into that only shortens the list that you're looking at. It doesn't save a value. Does that make sense? And then, of course, if you want to transform that, actually those fields are set. So in this screen, the operator and the transform are set in the template and they're grayed out. That's why you can't do anything with those. But the filter value is the one you're being asked for here. Make sense? Cool. And then to finish everything up, you've got your report options. You can choose a pivot data column if you want. You can choose whether you want to group your subtotals, and you can choose your output formats. This is the really important part. Do you want to see it in Excel, CSV, HTML? Do you want us to generate charts? We can do bar charts and line charts for you. And then if you want to output to a bucket, here's where you would do that. You also have to set, sorry, go back one real quick. There we go. Here where it says report folder and output folder, it will yell at you if you haven't set any of those yet. You have to choose a folder for the output to be stored in, for the report itself that you're saving, and then for the output files. So the CSV, the HTML, the Excel, where are those going to be saved? You have to choose one for each of those or you'll get an error. Okay, next up.
It's just the bottom of the screen because it was too big.
Yeah, it's too big. So we're going down. This is all the same screen. You've got your bucket output. You've got your schedule options. And then the email address, if you want this to be emailed to you. There was a long ago bug saying, hey, in the previous version of the reporter, our email addresses were filled in automatically, and now they're not. Can we do that? And so we did that a couple months ago. Now it fills in your email address automatically. Immediately, we got someone asking if they could turn that off. So we will have to build that into the next version and put a little clear button of some sort there so that you can choose not to have your email address filled in. There's, everybody wants it done a different way, and it's really hard to make everybody happy, but we'll figure it out. So once you have chosen where everything's going to be saved and how it's going to be output, and if you're going to send it to a bucket or an email address or none of the above, then you save and schedule your report. And you don't immediately see a report probably, because it probably has to take a little while to generate. So on the next screen, you will see the pending reports and then the ones that are complete that have run. And if they're complete, you'll see those output formats. And so here we chose HTML and CSV outputs. You will see those options, and those links will take you to those actual files. You can download them, you can view them in the browser, whatever you want. Usually the pending stuff goes through pretty quick, unless you've chosen a gigantic report that's going to run on thousands and thousands, millions of rows. then it might hang out in pending for a little while before it makes it down to complete. Or if you scheduled it, it'll be there for a while.
And then you'll get to use one of my favorite new features, which is that refresh grids button up at the top. If you're impatient like I am about reports processing, it is the best thing ever because I don't have to constantly click on the folder again. Load the record. my favorite button in the whole interface.
First button in the top left, refresh those grids. Refresh.
Or you can also refresh them one at a time if you want to do it that way.
Indeed, you have individual buttons here to refresh either pending or complete.
Next.
Next.
Questions.
Question time. I've been talking for a while. Andrea's been talking for a while. You've probably got some questions.
Yeah. Maybe if you don't have questions, that's also okay. We'll give people a few minutes to to type, or I think you can request from you can request to also talk. Where are we headed from here?
You mean in terms of development, Jessica?
In the presentation, in the development, in the world.
Yes. Yes.
Let's see. In this presentation, the next up we'll be talking more about some of the new features in development. Just more bug fixes, I guess. I am not aware of any large-scale development projects happening around the reporter right now. There's none in my department. If you have one in mind, give me a call.
Yeah, we don't have anything scheduled for reports right now. We would love to if anybody wants to fund a project. I know that the sort of open question, now that we have the full reporter redone in the style of simple reports, is what is the future of simple reports? And I don't have a good answer for that yet. I don't think that the reports interest group has a good answer for that yet either. But I would certainly love to sit down and talk about that with someone.
Yeah. I see, but Blake linked a simple reports bugs. Yeah, we're going to talk, I'll be talking a little bit more in detail at the end of the next section about some of the bugs that are up. But there's a question in the chat. In my library system in Indiana, I'm still using the old reporter. Will this change? That is something you should ask your local Evergreen support people. So it depends on what version you're running, and it depends on whether they have decided to keep you on the old reporter, which I know some sites did because there was some initial bugginess with the new reporter. So that would be a question to ask your local support people. Yeah.
Right. I think there were some folks who realized that they had a lot of those old templates that just didn't quite play nicely with the new reporter yet, and they needed time to get them all converted. And so some folks are still using the old version, even though they've got the Evergreen version that has the new reporter. The old one's still there. So you can still use it, and some systems have kind of redirected those links to go to the old one still until they get everything updated.
Yep. Well, that's an interesting bug, Blake. By interesting, I mean why. And then Chris, sorry, I'm not like busting on you at all, Blake. I'm just rolling my eyes internally at the realities of software development. Going back to what Stephanie said about sometimes it's not better to reuse code. If anyone would like to invest in a time machine for us, I promise we will go back and rewrite the new reporter like perfectly. And then Chris is noting that there is an old I don't think, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think this actually ever went in to Evergreen Main. I think it was just a Pines customization that was a very much more simple version of the simple reporter, and they called it quick reports. So Chris mentioned that Pines, you guys are working on that or looking for partners to bring that into Angular and maybe bring that into Main? Have all reporters for all peoples.
Hi.
Hi.
We don't have we have a lot of desire, not a lot of time devoted to that. And our libraries have been using the quick reports feature. It just offers a simple canned reports interface. We also have the executive reporter that's part of that. It's like pre-runs report, just sort of, you know, request a download of that report, which is extremely fast for them, so they can run off to a board meeting with current stats and stuff like that. So we've talked about the dashboards.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know there's been dashboard conversations floating around for a few years
Yeah,
now.
I think a dashboard would probably replace the executive reports need. And we're kind of asking the questions about like what does quick reports solve, as opposed to like we need every single PHP feature, etc. But whatever we're developing would be in Angular and could be a platform for kind of a canned reports type interface. I mean, like to have canned reports, you just create a report folder and stick some templates in there. But for our users, they like the simplified interface. And yes, Quick Reports was developed 2015-ish was when that was first put in. Anyway, we can. It's sort of a side conversation. The other thing, since I have the floor, is I'm interested in some sort of UI that would allow administrators at each system to manage their system's reports. This is sort of a mature consortium need. Like, if you just started on Evergreen, you probably won't get here for years. But basically, our administrators can see all the different reports, and you got a staff member who leaves, and those reports just keep running forever unless somebody goes in and destroys them. So if we had an interface that would allow an end user with enough perms to go in and actually manage those, change the emails they go to, change the frequency, cancel reports, all that kind of stuff. Those are things that I would like end users to do, because right now it kind of falls on me, or I can create like simple bash scripts that my coworkers can use. But like it's sort of an like I said, this is like mature consortium administrator need that I would like to see and am interested in contributing to.
Okay. Well, that might be the kind of thing that Rick could go on the RIG discussion list, the reports interest group discussion list for Hackfest this week.
Sure. I'll join that sometime.
And if anybody is interested in, talking about that further, let me know. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to drop off. Bye.
Thank you. And if anybody wants to kind of whip up, what you have in mind that you want that to look like, that'd be awesome. That always gives me food for thought.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we don't miss the other questions that went by in that time. One was actually a comment from Gary that says, show where debugging output is. So Lena, I commend that into eminently capable hands to show during the live demo. So we will show where that is. Awesome, thank you. There's a question from Benjamin Kalish. Are there any performance issues with the reporter that might make administrators hesitant to give all users the ability to use the reporter to create their own templates? I don't know the answer to that. I would think about that question more in terms of what data I would want end users to see. Obviously, the more people doing things on the reporter, the more that's going to hammer your system. But I've never thought about that from a performance standpoint. I've thought about it more from a standpoint of, there's obviously patron information in there, and you don't necessarily want everybody to be able to see all of that.
Yes, there are concerns about performance. I think the security stuff is more important, but I would say like you don't. First of all, if you're running it and you're sort of the person who helps with those sorts of reports, that's all you're going to do all day long. If you give that to too many people, You'll just be, oh, I need help, I need hand holding while I create this template. It's far easier to just take it over or train a few select competent people to do it and
Right.
grant it
So
singly. So
yeah. Thank you, Chris. So yes, the answer is yes, there are performance concerns associated with that, which is not surprising, because running a report does, it queries your database. But there's also the concern of making sure that end users are trained to do that correctly, so they don't blow up your support queue, and also trained that they can't just dump a list of patron addresses for their own personal nefarious purposes or whatever, or even non-nefarious purposes. It's just a bunch of different considerations versus giving all end users reports access versus select ones. Unsupervised new reports writers will try to pull a shelf list of everything. What are you talking about, Jennifer? That's like every time I'm in a demo system, that's the report that I create. But there's only 250 BIP records in Concerto, give or take. So, okay. Any other questions or comments before we take a short break? Yes, I agree. I'm going to quote Chris here. Incompetence is more of a concern than malicious actors. Yes. Never, what's the saying? Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. So anyway, if there's no further questions, we'll take a quick break. This says 5 minutes. It might be less than that because y'all had so many good questions and discussions. But we will give you a moment and then be right back. Reports dance break. I don't have any music scheduled for this, so everybody do your own thing. Okay, give about 30 more seconds for break. We still have a lot of content to get through, and I don't want Lena to have to cut short her demo. And I'll just go ahead and advance the next slide so you can admire that meme there as well. While I find my okay. Let's. Oh wait, did we lose Stephanie?
I think we just lost Stephanie.
Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I'm supposed to do the next section, so I'll go ahead and start, and hopefully we will have a Stephanie again soon.
Nobody ask any hard questions while she's gone.
Yes, nobody asking you hard questions while she's gone. Okay. Right. So we're going to talk about some of the new features that Stephanie touched on a few of in the last section. And this is literally the same slide as before. But some of these things in the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those things we showed you before the break. So I'm going to show the last couple now, which will include the ever entertaining prospect of Andrea attempting to explain nullability and not sound like some kind of moron. So pray for me, guys. All right. So one of these new features that, and Stephanie mentioned this, is that you can get Evergreen to show you a list of all reports that are associated with a particular template. So you would do this from the templates menu, and then you'd select a template and then use actions. And then one of the actions is report list. And that will show you all of the templates or all the reports that have been run using that template, which is very, very helpful. And there was like the breadcrumbs for this existed before in the old reporter, but this makes it like you could just sort of like drill down into your output list and like figure it out, like tracing backwards, but this just gives it to you in one click, which is handy. And then similarly, in the reports folder, you can do the same to see output list. And in this case, I did collapse this screenshot, like because there's a lot of white space there under pending. So that's why there's a line in the middle of this. It's just the screenshot. And so this is showing me all of the output related to that report. So next up is nullability. Oh my God, we're never going to say this word again. So on the left, it shows a sample data table using the Evergreen default, which is left outer join. And you'll notice that in the holds count, that last value is null for that barcode there. And there is certainly circumstances where you would not necessarily want to see that data. So using an inner join, it would instruct the reporter to drop values from the left column if they are null in the right column. So that a null value means that there is no, it does not mean 0. It means it's null, it's blank. There's no value, no information there. So if you have report output that's going to include a lot of null values, you would probably want to use nullability to drop them from your reports. So inner joins will only show results that are not null. Outer joins will allow null results. And in the Evergreen's case, the default is a left outer join again, which is the child. You might know this as child nullability from back in the day. In the initial iteration of the new reporter, this was implemented as a required checkbox. So selecting the checkbox would tell the template to not include the data if the field on the child or right side source is null. That's clear as mud, hopefully. Then we decided to make this prettier, not we personally, but the community, to use Venn diagrams, because Venn diagrams are a little bit easier to understand. So in this case, you're seeing examples of both left join, and then the highlighted one for base transaction is showing an inner join. And they're little cute, tiny little Venn diagrams. Venn diagrams are how I understand nullability. I'm not necessarily a particularly visual person, but this has very much helped me. So what this shows is a different way of showing that left outer join. So you've got the parent on the left and the child on the right, and those asterisk fields are showing you the data that's included in the output. So that's showing all of that data. The inner join is only showing values that are not null across both of them. So nullability allows you to have more control over whether the null values in your fields are included in report output. So in the slide before, you saw the tree on the left, and the tree shows the sources that can be linked to your main source, and a link is a join. So when you're going through that source tree, item is your main source, and then shelving location is a table that is linked to that. And then you can show, the type of join determines what null values will show up in your data set. So again, inner joins, which is on the right here, will only show not null results. Outer joins will allow null results from the child. So that is now the default in Evergreen is left outer join, which means the parent can have a null value in the linking field. So the parent will have a row, but all the child fields will be null. If there is a value for the parent's linking field, then rows from the child where it matches will come in. And using these new nullability checkboxes, using the inner join rather, we can create an output which will tell Evergreen to not include results where either parent or child are null. How badly did I explain that? Cool. Lena Hernandez gets 100% credit for these Venn diagrams. The Venn diagrams in the interface, I think it was Stephen Mayo and Stephanie Leary. Didn't you guys do those? I'm pretty sure it was Stephen and Stephanie who added these.
That wasn't us.
What?
I think that was Mike, and I forget who suggested it.
I think it was Stephen Mayo.
It might have been.
It
was okay. It wasn't me.
Yeah. I was gonna say it was okay. Cool. So yes, adorable little Venn diagrams that make life easier. And forthcoming is right join. So that will be added to this cute little dropdown, and a right join will let you specify that you want all results from the child table and only non-null results from the parent table. And so longstanding users might know this as parent nullable. It's less commonly used in Evergreen than left or inner joins. And for that reason, we had actually intentionally dropped it with the new reporter, and then everyone told us we were wrong, and we appreciate that. No sarcasm. So there is a pending bug out there to restore right joins. So go ahead and whack that one if you would like to see right joins come back. And then that is a good segue into community bug fixing. So one of the things that's really hard about developing big features in a community like Evergreen is that everyone's got their different ways of doing things. There's a lot of long-standing consortia in this community who have a lot of time and effort and knowledge invested in the system, and I don't see all of that from my perspective necessarily. So when we're doing a big project, it's kind of become, and I think this is probably true of any software, but I only have experience with Evergreen really, that no amount of testing will cover all real world use cases, right? So reports it was tested by Equinox staff. It was tested by KCLS staff. It was tested by several Evergreen community members with deep experience in reports, including several people that were part of RIG. And when it was merged with the idea that, yes, this is a good replacement for the old reporter. And then, reality sets in. I still think it's a good replacement for the old reporter. But there were some fairly impactful bugs that came out of this. I have linked, so these are all here if you wanted to go read about them. I have to be clear that all of these have been fixed. So the reporter, these were the ones that I would consider, and this is the impactful versus non-impactful, by the way, is 100% my subjective, but with some data organization of these. Your mileage may vary. But some of these, did come up that we filtered up to us from our customers. Some of them were from community members. Some of these were fixed by Equinox. Others were fixed by other community members. And the important thing is that all of this feedback is a good thing. All of this feedback is something that really, like, everybody should be offering at all points in the testing process. So if you've never participated in a bug squashing week or feedback fest, this is my plea to do that. The only way that some of these things get tested is, via end users. Another thing for something like reports is that it can be very hard to test this on a small data set, such as the Concerto data set or even the expanded Concerto data set. This is the kind of thing, and this is something that we've been noodling about here in Equinox for bigger projects, about what it would look like to test things on a much, much larger database. Of course, there's 8 million problems with that are beyond the scope of this presentation. But this was one of those ones where when we had to look back at it, some of these things would have been more obvious in a larger testing against a larger data set or a real world data set with 18 versions of templates and 20 years worth of reports and data cruft in it, as opposed to a pristine database. So this is all to say that I feel like this is the system working as much as it is. And we did in this bug list indicate which ones are our favorites. Stephanie's is the no way to select all the options from a list, which is allowing it allows range selection in those drop downs. So these were I would consider these definite usability issues, but not immediately impactful. I will note that the nullability join selection is confusing, which is my favorite. That's the one that gave us those cute little Venn diagrams in the source selector so that you can now use that as a visual shortcut to what you're doing. So that is my favorite of these bugs. And then, of course, some of them were really more in the realm of annoying, and that is not me dismissing these bugs at all. A bug is a bug. But, things like spelling mistakes, capitalization. The reports share folder button that one was pretty funny because you would click it and it would just start creating this list of buttons, and it was kind of comical. But yes, annoying.
And there was a really good reason that it did that, and it was actually really hard to work around it.
Okay. You want to tell us the really good reason?
Well, now that I've said that, I don't remember what it was.
Oh. But I thought that was a prelude to you being
no,
like,
it wasn't a prelude.
This is why.
It was honestly I looked at it and there was a good reason why the code was like, no, I don't know that there's already a bug there, a button. I'm just going to create another one. Yeah. Anyway, it wasn't just a glitch. There was a serious logic thing there.
There's a serious logic thing there. Well, the problem with computers is that they will do exactly what you tell them to do without any regards for, human interpretation.
Exactly.
So, what is the lesson here? That is not the lesson. I just wanted to throw in a picture of Ed. So, more eyes on code and interfaces always equals better software. Always. All of you are experts on things that I and my team and our development partners are not necessarily experts on. So people looking at these things, people breaking these things, people filing bugs about these things is going to lead to improvements. Everyone uses reports, and you could substitute reports and put any interface in here a little bit differently. And some use cases are legitimately at odds with other use cases. Sometimes a judgment call needs to be made about how something works one way or the other. Now, that is not often the case. Usually we can make it work for everybody. But then there's the flip side of making it work for everybody. That makes things very complex. And one of the things about the reporter is that it is very complex. And it's very complex because it's very powerful. You can do so much with it. But because of that, it has, you can't necessarily strip it down to, the simple or the quick reports version. Those are giving you a very small subset of that within a constrained, set. But like with the Evergreen reporter, you can, or the main reporter, the big reporter, the advanced reporter, we should probably decide as a community on a name for what this one is. You can't necessarily, you have the ability to do so much within that the complexity is necessary, and that makes it hard to understand. However, collaboration and responsiveness are, of course, hallmarks of open source software. And as we know, community makes everything better. So if you ever feel guilty for filing a bug or raising a bug or complaining about something to your support team, don't. Because we are not end users. I was an end user of Evergreen for many years, but it's now been a decade since my day-to-day Evergreen end user experience. Someone like Stephanie comes in with deep knowledge about user interfaces and is like, I love you, but this is terrible. That might be an actual Stephanie quote, and then she helps us to rebuild those interfaces according to proper, accessibility and usability standards. But before, we didn't really have a lot of that in that community, and that is not in any way, shape, or form a knock on any of the other developers in this community. There's a bunch of brilliant people working on this. It's just different, different skill sets. So I know that was a much shorter section than the last section, but it's a place to take a little bit of a break for questions before we launch into the last section. So are there any questions? I'm scrolling up through the chat right now. Part 3 of The Lord of the Rings. Oh, an excellent question from Elizabeth Davis, which is that, do you think there will be report templates added to the Concerto datasets for future testing? I don't think anyone's working on that, but they should. Is there a bug? There should be a bug for that. If there is not a bug for that, there should absolutely be a bug for that, because that is a great suggestion.
File it. Yeah, I want to see it.
Yeah, through open source, all things are possible. Sorry, I apologize for the blasphemy, but those of you who know me are utterly unsurprised. So yeah, the answer is yes, there can be, but of course somebody has to do it. But I don't recall seeing a bug for that. Of course, sidebar on Launchpad, the number one way to find out if something's already been filed as a bug is to file a bug for it. And then somebody's like, no, this is a duplicate bug. How hard would it be is not a question I am qualified to answer. Does anyone want to chime in on how hard it would be to add templates to Concerto?
I don't think it's that hard. Yeah.
Blake says cake. Great. So, all of the, let's see. Oh man, good pile of developers on this this here reports pre-conference. So yeah, maybe one of you all can pick that up. Well, I won't call out names personally, but it's a great suggestion. Thank you, Elizabeth. And yeah, they're going to discuss it at the reports interest group meeting on Thursday. So if you have an opinion about that, you can bring it to reports. All right, great, love it. See, together we did it. This is how things in Evergreen work, and I love it. All right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Brilliant suggestions. Okay. Now we did have another break scheduled for here, but I'm cognizant of the time. And Lena, I want you to. So I'm gonna defer to you, Lena, because you're up next. Do we want to have a break, or do we just want to switch?
Let's have a 3-minute break.
Okay.
So we can switch, and I can take a second, prep myself.
Great.
But
so we'll take a brief break. We're going to switch screen shares. I'm going to stop sharing, and then Lena's going to start sharing. So she can do the demo. Yay. And if you have any other questions, I'll hang out.
All right, you should be seeing the break screen. Fabulous.
Okay, looks good.
Let me get a sip of tea and then we'll get going. Okay, we'll get started in just a moment. I think I've got all the screens rearranged. All right, so let's talk practical. Let's actually look at running the reports using all those great tools that everybody has contributed to building. And I want to start off with just a quick flashback, a quick summary, scene setting as you were from the previous sections. One of the things that I've really appreciated from a training aspect about the whole rewrite is that all these new interfaces are giving a much more consistent experience between Evergreen and reports. And so that's something that you see throughout even like the template layer where, where we have grid actions now for things in the grid. We have buttons for things that are happening in the folder. Likewise, there's been some improvements in kind of how things are laid out. So for folks that have gone through training with me recently, it is now a little bit easier to kind of see all the pieces of a template building all in one spot. You don't have to kind of scroll down to find the things hidden below the fold of the screen. And it is a little easier to kind of make decisions as you're going through the process of building out your templates. It's now the option to set my type of report. There's a nice little tree that I can see kind of how things are connected. I can select the field I want, and when I select them, they're going to show up on the right and not just kind of below the fold of my screen. Have those options to adjust the output order or the transforms or the any number of things. I can apply filters. I can do the report layout, which is a nice little addition there. So we got a lot more control, and it's much more visible on the screen without really actually being any more busy than it was previous, because previous you still had that 3-panel outlay in the display options. And so when we first moved over to training with the new Angular reporter, I built out this slide based on how we've been training on the simple reports, because simple reports, it's designed to give you that kind of wizard-like experience where you kind of walk step by step through to the steps. And now the advanced reports, or whatever you want to call it, does the same thing, where you kind of have a step-by-step or a more step-by-step workflow. It's a little bit more obvious where things are. And then the other thing that we've mentioned a couple times is that not just with the angularization of the reporter, but more generally, there over the last couple years, there's also been some improvements in the consistency in terminology. So some of the transforms have changed to be more consistent with the other transforms around it. For instance, year and month is now just month, because that way it matches year and date. You've got copy becoming item, circulation library becomes checkout and renewal library. And not all of these things are tied into the angularization, but they are part of a larger project of making things a little bit easier for new users to come in and understand what reports is doing and how it's functioning and how it's connecting to the rest of the system. It makes it a little harder for people who are comfortable with the current situation, because it does require relearning where things are or what they're named. But overall, it makes it a much more welcoming experience for new users, which is something that I'm very much aware of, is how those changes in the interface are really big improvements in the accessibility of the interface for new users, because things are more obvious. You don't have to have that previous knowledge of how things are going, like with those little icons. You don't have to have the knowledge of what the little tree icon stands for. You can just say, okay, it's an org unit. And I've learned org unit when I'm learning all the other things. So those are my kind of summary slides of where we've been, what we've been talking about today. And now let's go actually go do it live. And it is always exciting doing demos live. You can never know what's going to happen. Who knows, might start some fires. We're going to be demoing on a Evergreen system that's using 3.14.5. And I'm going to go ahead and exit my slide preview here. And we're going to switch over to my system. So I'm using a fairly clean account in my system, and I'm going to be doing a couple different templates and reports for you so that we can look at some of those new components and new bug patches and all those kind of fun things that everybody has been helping to build out and contribute. And I've tried to do kind of a selection of things. And the very first thing I want to do is talk about searching. We're going to search and actually clone over a report I built earlier. Because I'm really happy about the new search interface. One of the things that I love the most on this screen is the fact that you can collapse and expand all of the folders. That's a little UI thing that's been showing up in a couple locations as things have been updated. And when you get into those, giant lists of all the things, all the folders people have shared over the decades, that can be a lot to search through. So sometimes you just want to hide it all or show it all. And that can be a really helpful experience. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with patron accounts. So when I search, another thing that I'm really loving is it actually now shows you what the folder is that particular one is currently in. So if you're looking at somebody else's folders and they've named them something nice, it's easy to see where it is. In addition to kind of the columns that you're already used to, with your grid options, which are a thing now in reports, I did want to also point out that you can add version as one of the columns in here. So if you want to see how long it's been since you have updated, how long it's been since you've updated your reports, that can be a really illuminating thing. I think it was Stephanie that suggested near the beginning of the presentation that it might be time to update your reports. I'm going to echo that and note that it's a really great opportunity to assess your reports, not just from a technology standpoint, but also from a, have you had new policies at a library or consortium level that need to be reflected in how your reports are built? So for instance, if you were not previously doing aged circulations where you were anonymizing your patron data after a certain point, and you were just doing your reports on that circulation source, it might be a good idea to go ahead and adjust your report so that you're including some of those age circulation statistics in your reports. So yes, there's a technology reason for taking some time to look at your reports, making sure they're on a more recent version, not on version 2 or 3, but also it's also a good time to assess your reports from a more strategic standpoint as well. All right, that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and actually clone a report. So as with all of the newer grid things, you can right-click and use your grids menu or use your action button. Either one will take you and allow you to do a clone your template. It's still going to give you that clone at the end of your template name so that you have that unique identifier. Your folder selection here is no longer a separate screen that you have to go through. It's going to take you in and allow you to adjust the folder on the actual template editing screen. It also is going to show you a nice little tree. There was that thing with the old folder selection for your template where some of your like newer folders were near the bottom instead of in a nice tree. This is a much nicer interface from my perspective. All right, so scrolling on down here, we've got our source up here. I've got a nice little grid of all of my different tables that are available. And just like we saw with the old reporter, if you select the table name, it's going to give you the available fields there. And as Stephanie noted, the text is now slightly grayed out and then little parentheses at the end there. As you are adding things in, you can just use the little checkbox there. It's going to add it into the bottom of my list. This is kind of a longer report here. And you're also going to have those breadcrumbs. And that is another place where I think with those shared reports that it can be really, really useful to upgrade your reports to make sure that that field actually says where it's coming from. I've applied some transforms on here already. Here's an example of where that more consistent naming practice with the month makes it kind of fall in to the normal framework that we have in other transforms. You can supply hints as to how these fields should be used at the template level. And so that's more about kind of what information is being used in that particular field. On our filters, we'll still have a kind of list of what you have currently available. Sorry, still have. That's something that's coming over from Simple Reports, not from the old reporter. And again, you'll have the ability to have those little breadcrumbs there, adjust your transforms, and set your operators. We can still do things like give hints as far as how people should be using those filters, as well as hard code in some filter values. And I'll be demoing that with another report. And then we've got the report layout where you can now adjust the order of your fields and adjust your sort order there. All right. So I'm not actually going to make any changes to this template. I'm just going to leave it as is. We're going to go ahead and grab it and run it. So here is the template that I just cloned over. And I am going to go ahead and run a new report from it. Again, I wanted to point out the fact that we've got these kind of folder level actions up here, and then anything for your grid is now an actions button, as users are going to expect from your from other parts of Evergreen. And new report. So this is something that I really love. It's much more clear that what your hints are and where they're located. They're called out much more clear. And one of the things that, oh, is my microphone picking up? She usually cannot be heard. Yes, that's Aster. She has opinions and reports. thinks they're very exciting.
I don't think anyone's upset about it.
Normally, my microphone does not pick up all the animal sounds. Like
No, you're all good.
chatting and whatever. One of the things I wanted to point out on this report here is something that came in recently with this kind of update. If you use a relative time value here, you can now enter in negative values and get future date reports. So I've been setting up this patron account's expiring suit report. And so I can say, okay, who's expiring in the next 90 days? So this is something that wasn't really possible in the previous version. And there was a request for a way to kind of get that information. And with the upgrades here, you can now do it with a negative value there. I also wanted to demonstrate one of the ways that you can do org selection because it's going to depend on how we've structured things. So here we've got a equals operator, and I can select my library. So I'm just going to go ahead, we'll select DPLS. But I can also include my descendants here. So even though I'm doing an equals, I can have something in my org chart there. So let's go ahead and jump to the next one. Here are my folder selections, giving me some nice little alerts that I need to select something, which is another nice thing. The number of times I clicked save and then had to go back and find my folders with the old version. But you've got those nice little alerts there. I also wanted to point out that your calculate grouping subtotals is now bumped up to the top instead of being kind of in the midst of your output options. I am going to demo the buckets in a little bit, so don't worry, I'm coming back to that one. And likewise, I wanted to point out, since we didn't really touch on it, that a lot of the functionality of how this kind of reoccurrence and scheduling, it's only going to show you those fields if you need it, much like you would see in simple reports if you use simple reports. But if you have not used simple reports, I did want to point those two little pieces out, that those fields are available. They're just hidden by default, so they're not cluttering up the screen if you don't need them. And Aster is very convinced we need to talk more about reports. Very excited. All right, so let's go ahead and save and schedule that one. And I'm going to jump over to outputs here. And I get to use my favorite button, refresh. Okay. So you still do have the pending and the complete versions. I know that somebody wanted to see the debug outputs. I wanted to point out there's actually two different ways that you can do this. One is you've got grid views now. So if we come in and look at our columns here, your debugging output is actually one of the columns you have available to you. Also, if you don't like to use those output options, you could still come up to your actions and view output, just like you did in the old version, to get to this screen where you can kind of navigate between the different things that you have available, including your debugging. So two different things, two different interface options there. And it just kind of depends on your preferences. I personally like the buttons, they're nice and clear, but if you would prefer to go into that pop-out screen and explore that way, that is also fabulous. Okay, let's go ahead and grab another report. I've got two more that I want to show you all. Aster apparently really, really wants to join in on this. Let's talk about nullability, everybody's favorite topic. I'm going to go ahead and grab a report from somebody else. I'm going to grab another one I'm just going to clone over. Again, same kind of layouts there. I'm not going to spend too much time on this now. I did want to point out that In addition to having the ability to add in all of your regular fields there, you can do your nullability selections. So I built that one out using my item. Oh, I should say, I built that one out. I can see exactly how I built that one out. So I did item, statcat entry map, statcat entry. And then I used my inner join option there. It changes to reflect it. And helps if I click on the name of there. And then I selected my value. I also made use of the fact that the name fields can be redone very easily. And still retain the name of the field it came from. So it's a nice little piece of kind of tracing back there. On our filters here, to supply a filter value, the process is as simple as a quick check there. And then the drop-down menu. This is another thing that I've been really loving and demonstrating is it's so much easier, so many fewer clicks to change those options. On this particular one, I do have it set up for in list as an operator. So we're going to see how that looks different when we go over to the reports level. Likewise, we're going to take a look at shelving locations because I know that is can be a really big list of things. And so I want to show you some of the tools there. And then here's my StatCat. I'm going to go ahead and apply it at the reports level, but of course you could enter in your values there if you wanted to select at the template options. All right. Let's make sure I didn't make too many changes here as we went. All right, let's save that one. And here's my StatCat one. Let's go ahead and run it. Oh, I was going to show you one other thing. So here I'm at the template level. If I double click on it, I have now started a new report. So I don't even have to go into the actions menu in order to start a new report from that particular template. Okay, so here's another org unit tree. And this one has a couple cool features to it. One is this shift to select a range. So if you are typically reporting out on a number of libraries, you select the first one, hit the shift key, select the second one to do a range there.
And one thing I want to point out here is that if you had just clicked the Jordan Public Library System in this screen, it would not automatically include all 4 of the libraries underneath that. So you do have to really click each one that you want to include.
That is a great extra detail there. I also want to point out that if you use the filter up here, you can also narrow down the list for yourself to select.
And Elizabeth Davis points out that if you hold shift while you select Jordan, it will select all of the children underneath. Correct. But if you just click it and then you run the report, you'll be like, why am I not seeing stuff from Murray?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't include Murray.
So I was with the shift and click the system level as Elizabeth was demoing or noting. You can filter to find a particular one if you've got a really long list of libraries there, or you can use the shift click to do a range. So there's a number of different solutions there for selecting a number of things in the list. Similarly, we've got a nice list here of shelving locations. And you also have the ability to do, oops, rolling too far. You also have the ability to do the limiting there on shelving locations. So especially where you are clicking through a really long list, you can limit it down. You'll use the little X there to grab additional ones. You can still use that shift click to select a range. And I should definitely undo that, or else my report's going to take forever. So I just have the one selected there. And Stephanie is noting that the name click is a bug release or bug fix that's coming up. In previous releases, point releases, you did not have the ability to select the names, so you had to do the checkboxes. That is now going to be fixed with the latest point release. And that is why I was pointing out that I'm on 5, because not everybody has this. And let's go ahead and grab my grant tracking. Okay, so I've selected the StatCat I'm reporting on. I have a lovely list of shelving locations there. And we've got our org unit tree with our various options for shift clicks there. Let's go ahead and run this report. Again, my favorite button in the whole interface would be the refresh button. Because I am an impatient reports runner, especially since I'm usually demoing. It just needs to go now. I mentioned before that you do have the ability to do a output button here, or use your actions to view your outputs, which for me is right below the sharing overlay from here. And we got our lovely little report there. Even with the switch to being able to access a particular report directly, you can still use that back to output index option to go back and view your various options there as well. It does work just fine. The CSV word wrapping there works just fine, except for when I add in my debugging column there. So all of the things that you had previously are in the old versions are still there. So I can also see what template it is coming from in the grid view there. If I had error text, I would see that there as well, and my run IDs. You also can clone a report from here. So if you have an output that you're looking at and you want to make some changes and have like a different version of the report, you can actually do that directly from the output as well. Much like you kind of would be able to go back and view or edit the report in the older version. The functionality is very similar, but they have added that clone language to reflect the changes that you're making there. Let's go ahead. Let me check my time real quick because I want to build something from scratch. How are we doing on time? We're doing fine. Okay. Let's go ahead and we're going to make one last template so that we can talk about doing this from scratch. Because it's not all just cloning. All right. Let's go ahead and grab a new template. So that is going to be a button up here because it is a folder action. I'm not acting on something that's in the grids down below. And I am going to just copy and paste over my name. I'm doing a quick example here using some things that I can hard code in to my template. So we can take a look at some improvements there. Hello, Aster. We're just having a whole party here all of a sudden. So let's grab our bibliographic record source. Oh, I want to pause here. Aster, really? And point out something else that I love has changed is our select source. It now says select source instead of core sources. And so our core sources and our other sources are now. Yes, a cat too. we've got quite the collection. The only geckos are outside. All right, so we've got our bib source. Let's go ahead and add in some display fields. Let's go and add in my record ID, because we're going to take this over to a bucket. We need our record ID. And let's do some simple record extracts. Let's do that. And let's grab my author and title. And let's grab some fixed fields. We're going to be doing a filter on my language. All right. Fabulous. Let's actually also take a moment here and change some of our text here. A filter on our language. And not in list. Oh, and let's do one more filter in here. Again, so we do not have too many results. Okay, so I must have bumped a setting on my microphone. I swear nobody usually hears anything around me. But yes, there are wrens outside. They are not pets. They're just well-loved. So the ability to add a bunch of things in your list as a hard-coded feature was something that can be a difficult learning curve for folks when they were using the old template creator. And so I just wanted to include this demonstration here of how easy it is now to hard code in values to the system. Because it's definitely a big improvement from a new user perspective. All right, so let's go ahead and make some adjustments to my layout here because I haven't played with that yet. I'm going to go ahead and let's sort by our language. And let's make that the primary sort there. Author makes more sense. Okay, so I've made some adjustments there. Maybe we'll switch it over there with our descending values. Let's save. Here's our new one. I'm going to just double click to make that new report. Here are my pre-added values. My false filters are already set. Now I'm going to go ahead and make that record bucket export. Here's my bib ID. I'm going to be putting it into a new bucket and run. So here is my result. We've got a number of titles in here, including a ton of things that some terrible person has put in with a bunch of missing language codes. Who could that have been? Definitely wasn't me. So the results there are pretty straightforward. And if we go take a look at our record buckets, here is the bucket that was made from those results so that I can immediately start acting on my results or save them for a future project. Okay. Oh, and there's one other thing that I was supposed to be demoing as we are winding really close to the clock. And that was back over here on our reports, because I realized I did not show you how to share a folder. And that is as simple as this share folder. Here's my list of options. And then the results are going to display just like they did in the old version with things in in parentheses. All right. I've run us a little close to the time. I was supposed to leave a little bit of time for questions. And the only things on fire were, the animals. So in our last few minutes together, besides, Chris getting booted from the chat, any other things we want to talk about? Overall, as we see if there's any questions in the chat, I just wanted to emphasize again that I know that change is hard. But the things that I experience from a trainer's perspective is that this reporter is going to be such a great improvement for new users of Evergreen. It shortens the learning curve for them to be able to use the reporter in a functional way, which is something that I really love about all of the collaboration that has happened on the building of this, because things like that nullability Venn diagram thing are such a huge improvement for new users to understand how reports work and how they can get what they need out of the system, and understand that data is there. Yep. Thank you, Sarah. Exactly.
I just want to point out in the chat that Jessica who is the convener of the reports interest group, and isn't it also your birthday, like literally this week, Jessica? Happy birthday, Jessica. She posted the topics for the reports interest group meeting, which is on Thursday. So if any of you want to continue any of the discussions that have been punted to that, I highly recommend you attend reports interest group, which is part of Hackfest. And Hackfest, you do have to separately register for Hackfest, but it is 100% free. You just have to make sure you go register for that on the community webpage. Can't tell if Jason Stevenson's being sarcastic or not, but I'll choose to interpret it as sincere. I'm really glad that you can make reports, Jason. That's a big accomplishment.
Great question from Jessica Efron.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would there ever be time or energy for developing simple reports options that are mark-based, but not holdings or items-based? For example, on ebooks records, no holdings or barcodes, but pretty demanding for catalogers in terms of bibliographic maintenance, so it's important to keep track of those things. Or authority records, lacking holdings and barcodes, but complex and interacting with bib tables.
Ooh.
We don't currently have a project for that, but I'd love to do it.
No. But here, Chris Sharp's going to come save the day. If you're trying to save the day, Chris, you're muted.
Test.
There you are.
Okay. Not muted, he is not. Yes, it's possible. It does require a subtle knowledge of the structure of bib records and how to create the joins, so that you're getting the right data. It's harder to create a report about what's not there as opposed to a report about what's there, but it is definitely possible. We might even have some reports templates in Pines that we could share the descriptions of. Our descriptions include, the path, the breadcrumbs we're talking about, how to get each field, that kind of thing. And Mike is mentioning SQL being able to write it in simple reports. But yeah, and sometimes if those are reports that you want all the time, you can ask your system administrator if they have the skills to create a view in the database, or something that lets you use something that's sort of pre-made it's sort of a deeper level template. If you think about it that way, it's like something you can report from. A secret
I
report.
was going to say secret reports.
Yeah.
I love secret
Okay.
reports.
Sounds mysterious.
Yeah, I guess we have a few secret reports. I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
I think we're at time. Are we at time, Madam Moderator?
Yes, we are. I didn't know if there's any more questions or if you guys are just ready to ready to run away.
That was a lot. It was a lot for us and a lot for you. So thank you for
Yeah.
hanging tough with us and making us laugh a few times.
Yeah, thank you to Lena, Andrea, and Stephanie, and to everyone in the chat who had a lot of good tips and bug links. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks for not kicking me, Susan.
I was really close. So
You're right.
I
Your
know.
2 strikes are for the rest of the conference, though.
yeah, we'll see
Oh,
what
you
gives
gotta-
tomorrow.
crap. Oh, man. I got to sit
Doesn't
on my
race that
hands
every
all that
night.
time. All right. Okay, well, I'll step back and not risk any more problems.
Sure. Don't make promises you ain't gonna keep. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
All right, have a
Thank
good
you
rest
all
of
for
the
your
conference.
kind comments about the improvements. And if there's anything that the reporter doesn't do and you're like, I think it should do this, please file it in Launchpad.
All right. Wait, I gotta read Gary's nullability haiku generated by AI. A missing value, like an empty data cell, nothing yet present. I think that's a great way to close this out.
Yes, great closing remarks. Thanks all.
Bye.